If you're like me, you can't get to this part of the year and not think a little bit about your background, your culture, and for me, my patriotic feelings and heritage. Today at Change with Dane, I'm going to talk with you a little bit about that and a little bit about what the 4th of July meant to me, why it was important to me, and some of the ways that I learned about change experiencing the 4th of July where I grew up. I think I've mentioned in the past that I grew up in a tiny little town in southern Utah, way high up in the mountains. And one of the challenges for me was loneliness. There were very few kids my age in the town that I lived in. My brothers and sisters were all a lot older than me. And so I spent a lot of time kind of in solo activities, trying to live life and deal with things and a lot of times kind of take care of myself. So that did bring up some concerns, some issues and some challenges, but the 4th of July was not one of them. A lot of people returned back to this area because it's in the mountains, it's cooler than a lot of the desertscapes around southern Utah. And a lot of people came back because there's a feeling of community, connection. The religion that I grew up in was big in families and, and reuniting and continuing to kind of build those feelings of connectedness amongst children and aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters, the whole 9 yards. So our little town would go from a population of about 90 people on a good day to the 4th of July time frame of being hundreds of people who would come back to town and partake in the small town feel, in the better weather, and in kind of this patriotic cultural upbringing that we had all kind of been a part of. For me, it was glorious because there were so many people, so many individuals that I had seen in years past, wanted to connect with, had fun around. There were lots of cute girls that came to town. It was just a lot of fun. And for those of the few of us youth who lived in the town, we would spend 3 or 4 weeks leading up to the 4th of July, creating a patriotic program that often had little parts, skits, music, dancing, and they would become part of an annual program that we would put on for the town and anybody visiting to kind of get the day, the 4th of July day started with, that more formal, we're saying thanks to God and country for patriotism and our freedoms and all of those kinds of things. Then we would proceed to come back in a gathering at the church usually, and we would have sports that were laid out for each year group or each age group. Most of them would be kind of simple relay races where people of all ages would compete and see who was the best at running, wheelbarrow races, egg on the spoon, you name it, we did it. And a lot of fun just to be together and to release, some of that energy and those good feelings of connectedness. There was always a very drawn out basketball kind of game in the afternoon. Most of us who grew up in that area played basketball. We loved it. And so when people would come back, it was awesome to have enough people there to play and enjoy that. And families visiting, riding horses, walking, just enjoying the beautiful weather and the small town atmosphere. And then in the evening, in the early evening, there would be a Dutch oven mutton, Dutch oven, and Dutch oven potatoes cookout. The men of town would cook and provide this meal to anybody who would come from around the area, the country, the state. And again, just an opportunity for people to gather and enjoy a meal that they wouldn't normally have access to, and be there in a supportive fashion, just getting to know each other. And at night, my parents and their best friends were members of a little band that played a lot of music dedicated to people being able to do line and round dances. Definitely old-timey music, but definitely an opportunity for people outside of the area to see how we enjoyed ourselves and ways that people had danced and had fun for decades before that, in sort of this small town atmosphere. Now, I gotta say, I loved the 4th of July. I loved it when the town would fill up with people. I loved it when others would come and I'd get a chance to reconnect. I loved the focus on the patriotism of saying happy birthday to our country. I loved pretty much everything about that day. It was my favorite time of the year because it was impossible to be lonely. But the 4th of July sort of was the crest of summer. And as things would then wind down and people would eventually kind of, head back to where they came from, there would still be some people around a little bit later and through to the end of the school year. But I suffer great, great sadness when those good people started to leave and go back to their normal lives. I suffer great, great sadness when my brothers and sisters would leave and take their families and head back to their normal lives. And very early on, I had to learn how to be resilient and deal with this huge swing of emotion, the huge swing of change that would not only come into our community and culture, but also come into my heart as people would come and reconnect and then say goodbye. I wasn't the one leaving. I was the one that was going to stay and still live in this tiny town that was very isolating for me. So I have a history of dealing with some difficulty. This was, for me, a big issue with feeling isolated and being alone, but not all the time, because the 4th of July was my favorite time of year to reconnect, see, and be with people that normally weren't around. What does that have to do with your change? Well, I think what it has to do with your change is that it's a remembrance that we're all in this together. Nobody gets through life without some sort of change. Nobody gets through life without some sort of difficulty in dealing with things that go on around us that we honestly have no control over. Nobody is immune to having to look at sometimes difficult emotions that come with circumstances that we didn't want or would prefer to be different. And I think there's power in knowing that we all go through this, that we all need to support each other, that everybody is in some way struggling with change to some degree more than others on any given day. And that if we can have a little bit of compassion and just keep in the back of our minds that the people that we're interacting with could potentially be facing huge changes and we don't even know it. Or maybe they're struggling with a change that feels like a thing that's too big for them or very, very hard for them to deal with. Maybe they're recovering from addiction. Maybe they're going through intense grief. Maybe they're dealing with an illness or a mental health condition. All of these things we may not know, but if we keep in the back of our mind that we're all in this together, that we're all going through some sort of change, perhaps we can open our hearts, and especially for me at this time of year that I love so much, we can engender greater empathy in ourselves towards others and hopefully support, especially the ones we know and love, in the changes that they are facing. I appreciate you listening today and going through this little bit of memory lane with me. I get very nostalgic at this time of year, and this is 250 years for our nation. I lived through the bicentennial. It was great. I think it's awesome that we get a chance this year at this time of year to host the World Cup and to see the amazing things that are happening across our country. Let's keep that going, and let's keep supporting each other through the difficult changes that we might face in our lives. Please click subscribe. Please click like, and thank you again for listening. Until we talk again, take care.